there. If you look at the year that Hillary Clinton was running against Trump, they were both there and saying nasty things at one another, and everybody laughed because that was the nature of that. But in general, jokes are fallacious arguments. So you might have fallacious arguments that are not funny, but it seems like jokes tend to be funny because they are fallacious arguments. And if they are funny, of course, they're meant in a sense that they're expecting you to laugh at them. The neat thing about this book, which is different than just that the idea that fallacious jokes and humor are connected, is that why do we laugh? What's the evolution? If you're using an evolutionary model of why we are the way we are, then there has to be some sort of natural biological explanation for why we have a funny bone. Why do we laugh? And this book basically argues, as its thesis, and I think, at least with this book, it was new to me. I don't know. There was a whole lot of folks out there. But the basic, I had it underlined. This is one of those darn books where, if you underline books, usually I try to avoid it because tidal wave won't take them if you've got too much underlined. But this one was so interesting. I've underlined practically every page, so it gets to the point where that there's not really much point in underlining anymore because you can't just go right to the. But essentially, at the cusp of our becoming an intelligent species, we began being able to recognize something that was not logical. And if it was a puzzle or a problem or some sort of serious issue that we had to solve, once we did solve it, biologically we were rewarded with the hormones that say, "Oh, good job," right? And what their thesis is that the indications of that feeling of good job that we solved this problem is what makes us laugh. So that basically the reason we've come to like jokes is because it's like problem solving, and we've solved the problem. So when we hear a joke, we know there's something wrong with that, and once we figure it out, then we're like, ha ha. So basically that's the biological rationale in the book for why we like humor. And now we're at the point where we're not necessarily just solving a problem. We're going over and over and over again the same problems, essentially, and laughing at them. So let me read this page here. This is the ad for the book, which I'm sure you could get in the library. Daniel Dennett, by the way, just died this last year, which is sad because he was one of the best current philosophers in the world, really. But so this evolutionary and cognitive theory of humor seeks to reveal the complex science behind why we crack up. So that's a sophisticated analysis written with clarity, good cheer, and of course wit. Steven Pinker, author of How the Mind Works. And some things are funny, jokes, puns, sitcoms, Charlie Chaplin, The Far Side, Malvolio with his yellow garters crossed. But why? That's a Shakespeare reference. But why? Why does humor exist in the first place? Why do we spend so much of our time passing or amusing anecdotes on amusing anecdotes, making wisecracks, watching The Simpsons? So in Inside Jokes, Daniel Dennett, Matthew Hurley, and Reginald Adams offer an evolutionary and cognitive perspective. Humor, they propose, evolved out of a computational problem that arose when our long ago ancestors were furnished with open-ended thinking. Mother Nature, aka natural selection, cannot just order the brain to find and fix all our time pressured misleaps and near misses. She has to bribe the brain with pleasure, so we find them funny. This wired-in source of pleasure has been tickled relentlessly by humorists over the centuries, and we have become addicted to the endogenous mind candy that is humor. So that's kind of intriguing and also fun. And before we had this book, I did try to always connect humor with fallacious reasoning by going over different comedians, for example. You know, especially now with YouTube, we can just pull up all kinds of folks. And my quiz question for the day is, please send me a link to your favorite comedian or one of your favorite comedians doing a sketch. That would be fun for me. I've been collecting names in the back of this book since I got it. So I've got Dan Cook, Robin Williams, George Carlin, Pablo Francisco, Gallagher, Margaret Cho, Ellen DeGeneres, Russell Peters, Bill Cosby, Jim Gaffigan. I'm going to play a little of him in a few minutes. Stephen Wright, Mitch Hedberg, Fluffy.
That was one of the ones I was thinking about.
Well, you can always throw more. I can put tick marks. Multiple people, and there's others. It's just how many of these should I put down? And by the way, this book has jokes in it, but it's not a funny book. I mean, every chapter or every even subsection of the book, he has a little joke. Like I just opened the page here. So this is on anthropomorphism and anthropocentrism. And the joke goes: the chicken and the egg are lying in bed, and the chicken is I should have checked this and make sure it wasn't sexual. Some of them are. But the chicken and the egg are lying in bed, and the chicken is smiling and smoking a cigarette, and the egg is upset. The egg mutters to itself, "Well, I guess we answered that question." Thank you. Yes, I just got it too. I mean, I've got a exclamation mark. In the margin, this really can't go to tidal wave. Is it really? Question mark. That's to do with the paragraph above. Why do so many have trouble with humor, actually? I don't know if you've met people that don't have a sense of humor, can't tell a joke.
I'm one of them.
Well, I mean, there's the guy that went to prison, and the first night he's in jail, and after dark, and everyone's trying to fall asleep, somebody yells, "Number 32," and everybody laughs. After a little while, somebody else yells, "24," and everybody laughs. And this goes on for a while. So the next day, the new prisoner said to one of his cellmates, he says, "What was that all about last night?" And the guy said, "Oh, well, after you've been here a while, all the jokes we know have already been told. So rather than tell the whole joke, we just shout out the number of the joke." Wow, I see. So the next night, of course, it started again. 53, everybody laughing and so on. So after a while, he decided he would shout out a number. So he's 16, dead silence. Nobody laughed. And a few other people told numbers, and everybody laughed. And finally, he decided to try again. 11, dead silence. So he quit, and the next day he asked the same guy. He says, "Well, I tried telling, a few of the numbers too, and what happened?" And the guy said, "Well, some people just can't tell a joke." That probably is an example
No, I think you
No
did a
one,
good job. I just-
no one's laughing. But that is a serious question, by the way. And I happen, one of the benefits of raising a child with fetal alcohol syndrome is learning what kinds of mental difficulties, depending on the seriousness of it is a a syndrome. It is a spectrum. There's individuals can have all sorts of different effects from the mother, or the birth mother, having alcohol in her system while the fetus is developing. And of course, depending on when the oxygen is depleted, and so the fetus developing doesn't have the oxygen necessary to complete a particular cellular growth. And of course, it also affects the brain, and so on. So you can see individuals have it if it's serious enough. But even if you can't see it, it can still, of course, affect their life terribly because it affects them in other ways. And it wasn't until our son was 18 and had a new test that they identified all of the things that he was essentially going to never be able to do because of the alcohol effect on his brain and his body when he was a growing fetus. And it was terrible. It basically made me question, what I considered to be a human being was someone who had certain self-reflective abilities and certain cognitive abilities. And I discovered at this point that, all the problems we had with our son were, of course, associated with the effect of the alcohol on him. It wasn't the kind of effect that you could see it in his face as some can. He had fetal alcohol spectrum effect. Right. So, it was also in his reaction to things. We had never understood why he seemed to be so accident prone, because we didn't think that was a mental issue, but it is actually. It's the whole body is actually affected by it. He couldn't tell time. Didn't understand money. Didn't understand logic, and didn't understand humor. So you see, there's this connection that, of course, if the brain needs certain abilities, logical abilities, in order to laugh and understand jokes, then the individuals that you might meet that don't get humor might be indicative, perhaps, of a problem mentally with their processing certain things. And I mentioned fetal alcohol because that's a personal experience of mine. And I raised a child that I remember. I came home from work one day at NSA, and I was just a short walk because the post was right there, walking distance. So we were still easily within the area that would be destroyed by a nuclear weapon, which was something that we thought about. But in any case, I came home and my wife was all upset because one of the children had touched the TV. And what had happened was the TV was broken, as far as my wife was concerned. Now, remember, my wife is female. Oh, I shouldn't say that like that. But I mean, there's things that she's concerned about, and there's things I'm concerned about. Our roles are separate. That's the way we were raised. And as a result, certain aspects of things, she doesn't get. So, she was worried that the TV was broken, and as soon as I saw it, I recognized that someone had pushed the PAL switch. So what is the PAL switch? Well, our TV we had purchased in Europe, and because the electricity is different in Europe, and the propagation of TV stations is different in Europe. The TV was made to be switched not only electrically from the 220 to the 110, but also in the way that it received the TV reception. So the button, there's a button on it, and if you push the button, it switches to European mode, and if you pull it, then it's back or in American mode. Well, one of the kids had pushed the